Hello and welcome to the IT News podcast. Our guest this week is POWERLINK Queensland's General Manager of Business IT, Mark Pozdena. Mark takes us through the electricity transmission operator's SAP journey, which has set the organisation up to potentially use Joule, SAP's AI Copilot. Its existing experience with Copilot in the Microsoft ecosystem and the value derived from that solution has proven influential in driving the search for more potential AI augmentations and use cases.
Just to start with, maybe it would be useful if you could talk a little bit about PowerLink and also your role within PowerLink, because I understand it traverses both the ICT and the digital domains within the organisation.
PowerLink is a leading Australian provider of electricity transmission network services. So basically what that means is we have a transmission network that's 1,700 kilometres from North Queensland, Cairns, through to northern New South Wales. It's a huge beast and quite magnificent, actually, if you like your big critical infrastructure. And it's made up of about 15,000 circuit kilometres. So it's quite a significant transmission line. It's a pretty significant piece of critical infrastructure, and it's been quite stable like that for the last few decades because of just the nature of the industry. As there's been an increase in renewable generators, that's where we've seen a big change in our company, and certainly the size of our network's getting bigger, and the amount of work that our company has to do is just increasing rapidly. And that certainly increased significantly with the announcement a couple of years ago of the Queensland Energy and Jobs plans. We've announced a huge investment in renewable generators and what was called the Queensland Supergrid, which is essentially what PowerLink is building their network to be. I'm the general manager of business IT and digital delivery. My role is essentially deliver capability and technology to enable our company to focus on what really matters. And that's focusing efforts on things such as what's in the Queensland Energy and Jobs Plan and connecting Queenslanders to a world-class energy future. So the way that my teams operate, you've got your traditional ICT in there, your service desks, your infrastructure teams, of course, security, because it's 2024, and if we don't have that, the rest of it doesn't matter. But also I have a very big delivery team focused on digital projects, and that's where things like SAP, and we are implementing Microsoft technologies and a number of other major initiatives to enable the company to do what they need to do. So some of them are around just better ways of working, some of them about better ways of working in the field, because we have a huge field team that are out there working with other partners building these huge bits of critical infrastructure, and we want them to have access to the right information, tools and services wherever they are. And then back in company, as our company's changed, we're investing in technologies to help the company move and adapt. And that's where products such as SAP come into it.
And you want to just discuss a little bit about how technology projects are planned within the organisation, because obviously you're in a fairly heavily regulated industry and you have certain requirements in terms of having to submit forward plans. It would include your technology investments.
Good question. The way that it works is because we do work under the regulator, we have to submit every number of years a multi-year plan, not just for IT, but for the whole company. It's called the Regulatory Reset Proposal, and it's essentially the financial and asset proposal covering lots of different types of investment over a 5-year period. In ICT, technology changes within 12 months. A good example is over the last 2 years, the massive rapid increase in take-up and capabilities and solutions in the realms of natural language AI. AI was on everyone's roadmap, but certainly not drilled down to some of the specifics of what's available as of today. So the way that we approach it isn't about we must do this random thing in technology X. It's about our asset base and what have we currently invested in the previous period? What does that look like? Or where will we need to renew, refresh, and maintain? And then where there are areas of the business and their parallel investments, and what do we need to do to support that? So for us, our plan was predominantly around taking where we had already invested and replacing, or generally you make an assumption that the technology will be different, particularly if we think about just servers and where we've gone from traditional on-premise tin to cloud. We've got to do something. So it's framing it around the requirement for what we would call a recurrent investment. And then there's areas where we know we need to do something in order to better enable the rest of the company. And that's where it's framed around improving things like data, definitely improving things in security, with enough specifics in there to justify an investment, but not enough to dig ourselves into a hole where we must give everyone technology that no one has anymore. So it's more around prudent investment, asset related, and making sure that it's doing the best we can with the investment that we have. And the way that we wrap it is we wrap it in a very straightforward benefits framework that basically says that if we are going to do something and we align it to what we said in that reset proposal, we want to make sure that the investment stacks up so that what we're saying has an outcome that is beneficial to the company or mitigates an issue or something on those lines. So it's very structured, but in a way, what it does, if you follow it properly, it just keeps you out of trouble. And I think that's really helped us at PowerLink. We've had quite a number of successful projects over the last few years, and it's because we've stuck to a plan, even if the technology has shifted. And it means that we are spending wisely and doing our due diligence to make sure that we are not taking things for granted.
Speaking of the plan, and I don't know how you want to couch it, but I'm wondering if you can just give us a bit of a sense of what the technology strategy looks like in terms of some of the key pillars and programs of work. And I guess just as a sub to that, is there a separate one for cybersecurity and then for digital delivery, or is it all wrapped up in the same one big plan?
Yes and no. So the way that we approach things here at PowerLink for digital is we came up with a digital vision as opposed to a very specific strategy. It was, what is it we actually are trying to do here with digital, with technology, in this case, a very heavy leaning on the business technologies at that present time. And the vision was pretty simple, that essentially we want the people in the ecosystem of PowerLink. That could be our people internally, it could be industry partners who we partner with when building huge pieces of critical infrastructure, our leaders, landholders and community, of course, because although we build these giant assets, a lot of the time it's in communities out there that might not have had this type of stuff before, or we've had a long-standing engagement out there in these communities. And then, of course, we're a government-owned corporation, so we have ministers as well who are part of our ecosystem. And then we have a PowerLink board. So all those people are in our ecosystem. And so our vision is to give all of them access to the right people, information, and then services the way they need, when they need, so that regardless of where you are, what you're doing, who you are, you should be able to get into the PowerLink machine to do what you need to do. And so that's pretty agnostic technology-wise. And then if that's our vision and underpinning it, basically a broad statement that links to our whole of organisation purpose, which is connecting Queenslanders to a world-class energy future, then that digital vision is about enabling the ecosystem of PowerLink with new digital capabilities and ways of working to connect Queenslanders to a world-class energy future. So if that's the vision, then underneath those, and this is why it was a yes and a no, we had a number of different strategies that basically shape different pieces of investment or decision-making. And the very first one we kicked off with, and the one that ultimately has been probably the key pillar of our success, it was a data strategy. Because at the end of the day, technologies, they come and go, but your information is the piece that's quite critical. And certainly when you're planning huge transmission networks or forecasting impacts to Queenslanders over a number of years or during summer seasons and so forth, having the right data and data you can trust, it's data you can make decisions on. And so we set up a multi-year strategy with a series of markers or maturity ratings that we wanted to achieve based on what we did with our investments. So that was one piece. And then the other piece, and this is early on in, I guess, our recent vision and approach to digital, was an ERP investment strategy. And that's around all the big rock type corporate tools like finance, HR, asset management, and so forth. And so those two really shaped the direction of what we've done, and also nicely aligned to our reset proposal that we submitted to the regulator. And what it's done is it's given us a very clear direction of what we're trying to achieve. And then underneath each of those, you then stand up your business cases, your traditional way of shaping investment. So we've got the big vision, we've got the strategies based on the stream, and we do have an information security strategy and a couple of others, application lifecycle management and so forth. They point us towards that direction, and then underneath the business cases to justify what it is that we're investing in.
So I imagine the data strategy and the ERP investment strategy are fairly closely aligned in terms of a lot of the core data would be in that core ERP system. And that brings us to the SAP ecosystem discussion as well.
Which is a nice segue, and it's almost like you've seen me present this before, maybe, but absolutely. So the alignment between those two strategies is twofold. One, on the technology layer, the technology we were looking at for the ERP strategy and implementation SAP was in the cloud, and in this case, it was an Azure stack, and that was also aligned quite nicely with what we wanted to achieve in the data strategy. So essentially, as we progress along the journey, some of the financial decisions can be wrapped up with each other. It's enabled us to leverage everything from internal expertise, work with the same companies to stand things up. And as we've matured in our ERP space, we've matured in the data space as well by leveraging the same environment that at the time our SAP environment was in. So as we were able to uplift SAP and some of the functionality there, we were able to uplift the data environment where essentially under our strategy, we consolidated multiple data warehouses and databases from years of operation. And look, how these were set up previously wasn't wrong. It was just how it happened at the time. Whereas the goal for us was a lot about centralization, single sources of truth. And then there's the other piece, which you mentioned, that a lot of the data was actually in the SAP space. So what we were trying to do as part of maturing that environment was taking a lot of the out of system processing or reporting and bring it back in system. So you've got a very pure and clean source of truth. And so that really enables us as a company to mature in a number of different lanes, be it from financial management, where we've been able to update our financial operating model, which you need a clean system to do that. If you try to change how your financial operating model works, which we've had to do as our companies developed in line with things like the QEJP, you can't do it in the customized system. You need a clean environment to apply those types of changes. And that's actually transformation. Transformation is, did you change the way the company operates? And one of the very first things we did when we matured our SAP and we went to, at the time, the latest version, and we moved to the cloud and we've updated our data maturity, is we've changed the way the company operated, and certainly was worth the effort, because we're at this point now where we've got a variety of data analytics capabilities across our company that are working out of our centralized environment, but they're now high-end data analysts in SMEs in their areas and even in the finance team delivering self-service analytics capability, which like 5 years ago, that was the holy grail of what we wanted to achieve. Is I didn't want to centralize an analytics factory of just building endless dashboards. We wanted to enable the company to be able to serve themselves and then in turn self-serve their own customers. And that's what that coupled strategy enables to do. And it's why we have been, I think, understanding our data, maturing our data, building it alongside our SAP. It's how we've been able to mature both as we've gone along and realize all sorts of capabilities and leverage things out of SAP a lot of people don't get to.
So just to unpack that briefly, and I just want to focus a little bit on the financial operating model that you just mentioned. So that work came out of the upgrade to the SAP. So the SAP was an enabler for that parcel of work, or was it linked at all to that parcel of work?
So it's an enabler and a driver. So it's both sides of it. We mentioned before that we're a regulated company, but we also have non-regulated work. And the system was designed for an era where that balance between non-reg and reg was different. And that's how the financial system was designed. And the way certainly our CFO put it, it's that dollars should be assigned to where the money is spent or wherever it's made. And while that's not impossible to do in a customized system, it's very manual, and we all know that eventually manual reporting, out of system reporting, things can get wrong, or maybe they take too long to report. You want systems that can tell you what's happening in your company then and now, but also manage your money in a lot more sensible, practical, and straightforward way. And so essentially all we knew operating model was making sure that things like cost allocations were assigned where they should be without having to go and change it later. And so we wanted to make that change, but realized it would be easier for us to essentially pull out every customization we'd had in there and move to a brand new environment, then try and force that operating model change or cost allocation model or whatever you want to call it into a customized system. That's why it is essential in this day and age to have it clean and keep those customizations to a bare minimum. There is sometimes justification for it. Sometimes the product out of the box doesn't recognize legislation from Australia or something along those lines, but everything else, its customizations are in there probably because someone liked a process to work a particular way as opposed to it was required.
But I gather you had the support of finance to make those changes at this point in time.
Our sponsor was the CFO. So probably the big takeaway and learning from me having worked at POWERLINK is just the power of that executive oversight and sponsorship. And also that this wasn't an IT project, this was a POWERLINK project. And it wasn't the IT team doing it to finance, it was the combined POWERLINK team, finance, IT people, even a couple of third parties working with us, delivering a new way of working at POWERLINK.
Let's just talk very briefly about the technology side of what you've done here. I'm assuming you moved from ECC to S4 on Azure. And if I understand it correctly, that maybe isn't necessarily the end game, and maybe you're moving further to Rise with SAP, which is their managed cloud service offering. But maybe you can explain it in your own terms.
Yeah, so we'll start at the beginning. It
Sure.
was not that long ago. We had a ECC business suite, heavily customized with a Oracle database, again, heavily customized on an Oracle physical Exadata in our physical data center. And the first thing we did was move to a HANA database in Azure, but we just brought over the ECC as it was. We removed a few customizations, but essentially the business end, or the end the users interact with, we left as is, so that we made it very clearly a technical project, because it was a big technical change for us, probably one of the biggest we'd ever done at the time. And that way we could focus on, I guess, the technical, the integration side of it, as opposed to mass business impact and mass business change. And it worked. We went live with that. And then a year later, we did the business side of it, where we took ECC Business Suite and we moved to S4. And at the very similar time, I mentioned some of the data stuff we did. That was in unison. We then immediately started with some investment in SAP Analytics Cloud and looking at taking advantage of some of the business planning and budget planning capabilities in that area. And we've been on a pretty healthy delivery rate since then. So over the last 18 months, we've put transmission billing into SAP. We've stood up a sustainability control tower for climate reporting. And we've even then moved, most recently, it would have been June, we went to SAP S4 2023. So we had the most recent version of SAP. And as we speak, we are moving into SAP Rise. Now, SAP Rise, that's a big shift for us. We were planning to do this in 2027. However, it was an alignment of the planets. We were always planning to do a refresh of the cloud infrastructure underneath our SAP environment. And we've just moved to SAP 2023 was a prerequisite for Rise. And so it made sense to, instead of replatforming our SAP environment within our own Azure, how about we replatform it to SAP's cloud environment, which from just a practical high level, that made sense. So we did a series of pretty rapid workshops with all of our technical leads and a bunch of SAP architects to see if that was actually possible. And it was. And so we kicked that project off not long ago, and we are halfway through it. In fact, we've moved our R&D environment over to Rise, and we, as we speak, moving our dev environment. And that's one of our most active environments due to the amount of digital projects that we run that are heavily integrated with SAP.
And how does that work? Because earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that one of the early advantages you looked for was combining ERP and data on the same cloud ecosystem. How does the data ecosystem evolve once you move more into the SAP cloud world for the ERP stack?
One of our requirements was ensuring that wasn't disrupted because it's been imported to us. The beauty of the way that the Rise environment works is essentially we're just getting a second environment that we can integrate to. Understanding how those two talk to each other has been one of our key requirements as we've gone through this journey, because not a lot of people have. But that's okay for us. We don't mind being out there in front and challenging what we can do based on the outcome. And certainly us bringing this forward by 2 years has a range of benefits that we are keen to realise. So the way that we've designed how we've plugging the two together has made sure that we keep that integration piece front of mind. So the beauty of the way that our data environment has actually evolved is now SAP, although it's one of the key sources of truth in that environment, it's not the only one. All we need to make sure is that as we take the SAP piece out from the current environment, that we replace it with a capable integration with the new SAP environment. We've built a number of things around the data environment now, so it's not just SAP's data warehouse in the cloud. It's quite an advanced model that leverages a lot of information across the organization.
And you mentioned field earlier. Obviously, some of the examples we've talked about so far are more around corporate finance and internal facing functions. But do you want to talk a little bit about some of the activity that is helping the field, particularly as your sort of asset size increase, your asset base increases?
Yeah. So we're rolling out field capability that is integrated into SAP. So it is our core system for works management, timesheeting, as well as asset management. But a lot of things that we do in the field, believe it or not, and actually I found out this isn't just for us, it's paper-based still, which boggles my mind. I've seen the teams go out with these huge piles of paper and never quite understood what it was. And so we have a number of projects that are either going live right now. We've got a pretty busy runway up towards Christmas of a release of a number of really huge capabilities that ultimately come back to field. But a lot of the stuff that they're getting will be replacing paper forms, integrating works management and work orders, quite easily so they can read them on iOS devices and they don't have to go in and look stuff up in SAP and things like that, which is your more traditional way of working. It's essentially giving easy access to information in a form that's, let's face it, Apple have cornered the market on how to present information. It's that easy capability that we're trying to deliver to our field people. And as well as that is remove paper forms as well. So integration with cleaner and easier data. And then also for the people that schedule work, drag and drop capability. So it's not a case of having to type everything in as well. So that'll just continue to evolve. But centered to a lot of that data are the data environment and then the SAP environment, because that from a business sense, even though it's field, that's where a lot of their back-end processing occurs, particularly works management. So it all is about making it easier for people. Other things that we have been pushing out there is that ability to just get that general access capability of information. So while it might not be as shiny as a form that replaces a 100-year-old paper form, it's presenting that information just in easy to access formats and so forth. So it is exciting to the people that normally have to wait or get things monthly and so forth. But it has been quite a journey. And certainly what we're looking to do next is leverage more of what we're doing in the artificial intelligence space. So we have a lot of investment in the Microsoft AI, and it's been wildly successful for us. We were in the early access program for Microsoft Copilot, and one of the big drivers for us to go early with SAP Rise was access to the SAP artificial intelligence engines, including Joule, but then also the ability to integrate with Copilot, because bringing some of that functionality and that information together, like, it is worth its weight in gold, which we've discovered through the heavy use of natural language AI already at POWERLINK.
I wondered whether, when you spoke about Joule on stage at SAP Now, I wondered to what extent that had been driven by your experiences with Copilot for M365.
Heavy. So what we've seen with Copilot is that when rolled out well with the right champions out there who know how to promote it, and certainly one of our biggest areas and biggest users of it are our finance team, using it to work with financial information, but also to develop things like business cases and so forth. Now, it doesn't do anything completely for you. It's why it's called Copilot, because you're the pilot. But at one of those SAP conferences, we saw a live demonstration of Joule. It's that bridge to that financial information, but more so from a functionality side of things, where that natural language capability to interact with SAP functions, that's pretty groundbreaking. And if we can use that to link over to our other technology stack, be it Microsoft Copilot or even we're a Snowflake shop, then there's Snowflake AI as well. There is a lot of opportunity for us to continue that AI journey, because the productivity gain is more significant than people realize. And it's quite amazing that people aren't more on the bandwagon for some of these bigger enterprise products, because the companies behind them, like SAP, have invested heavily in making sure that these things do work. And what is quite pleasing is to see SAP are very open to partnering with Microsoft on things, where a lot of the integration information they share now includes information around Copilot. So that works for us, because we are definitely a Copilot shop, and not just in the 365 space, but we've got it built into other platforms that we are releasing to aid in not just the field delivery side of things, but we've got a lot of projects on in the field, more than we've ever had in the company history. And so making sure they have the right technology is also quite vital. So all of this comes together back under that digital vision of making sure people can get access to the right information and people and services. And nothing helps you get there faster than AI.
And it's deepening the benefit to an organization like finance, for example, where you've stripped out the customizations from the back end, simplifying the back end side of things. You've helped them implement the new financial model collaboratively, and now you're allowing them to get access to the information that's remaining in there a lot faster.
Absolutely. And they release their own products. This is one of the most highly capable finance teams I've ever seen. Just their enthusiasm to embrace the technology they have is quite remarkable. And the fact that what they've done in the SAP Analytics Cloud space with the budget planning and so forth, that was quite a big shift for us using SEC planning for that kind of thing. It was probably the most advanced way I've seen that done in a number of companies, and certainly embracing the value of having internal SME data capabilities is a perfect use case for what a modern company should be doing. Someone with that financial background, but then also the ability to use that SME knowledge and capability with these tools to present information, or in the case of what we've got now is some very nice dashboard self-management budget type capability, which, look, sure, you could say you had that with your spreadsheet where you update your data information and send your spreadsheet back, but having that information that's much more accurate, live, and certainly is quite important for a company that's going through as much change as we are.
Obviously, you've gone through a real plethora of SAP systems within this ecosystem. Can you talk a little bit about how you've approached those projects and why you've had so much success with those projects?
Great question. It's pretty straightforward. There's probably 3 or 4 things that really have made it work for us. Top of the list is executive sponsorship. We've had our chief executive or our CFO or head of corporate making it very clear why we're doing things that support for change, because a lot of what we have done is change. And having that backing, and so that we're not constantly reinterrogating why we're doing something and understanding what we're trying to achieve, that makes the difference. Having someone there owning it and that accountability. The second is we split our projects up into a particular type of form, and that was technical or business. And so if we had a piece of work that we could bundle into, the biggest impact here is going to be a technical change, and therefore what needs to be tested are the integrations and so forth. And you always have to do UAT, but it meant that the business impact from the business disruption could be contained. And because of that, meant we could then focus on the business change in a more appropriate way and make sure that we're spending time on what matters to the customer, as opposed to getting the two mixed up or a business change tripping up the critical path for technical project. And it meant that we were able to contain these into smaller projects with much more specific outcomes and benefits. So a smaller project meant less risk. We know what we're trying to achieve. And if it blows out, it's only blowing out for that smaller piece, as opposed to big bang approaches, which I've very rarely seen any of those go successfully, dragging out then 18 months and then a lot of overhead of cost, change fatigue. The business disruption is quite phenomenal. And then that was probably the other piece for them with the business projects, making sure that our target groups work also quite small. Some of the biggest outcomes of projects that go poorly is you've disrupted your business. And that has such a negative effect on everything from why new business, but then also trying to repair that and bring that buy-in back in and address things like change fatigue. So contained, straightforward, and minimize risk. And then also any disruption of the company was nil. And so my absolute favorite quote I have from one of the go lives, big go live, was probably the biggest change to some of the end users around S4. And on the first day, the only phone call we got on our service desk by 10 o'clock was someone calling to see if we'd actually done it, because they can't see anything different. Perfect. That's the sign of success.
That's the episode for this fortnight. We'll be back with an exciting new episode in a fortnight's time. And for all the latest headlines and happenings in Australian IT, head over to itnews.com.au.